How American industry broke the Nazi mindset. They expected cages. They expected starvation, punishment, and moral lectures shouted in broken German. What they found instead were trains that ran on time, hospitals with white sheets, and factories that glowed like cities. The shock wasn't loud, it was mathematical. Every light bulb, every schedule, every meal became a piece of evidence that the story they'd been told was wrong. From Norfolk, from New Orleans, from Boston, trains carried them inland. Not in freight wagons, but in coaches with padded seats. They passed through towns lit at midnight, saw billboards glowing above diners, and gas stations serving cars at all hours. Germany had promised them an America in chaos. Yet outside every window, there was rhythm. Trucks moving in convoys, factories working through the night, families shopping in streets untouched by bombs. Propaganda doesn't survive contact with electricity. At the camps, the process was clockwork. Registration, showers, haircuts, medical checks. Each name written neatly in ledgers. Every man photographed and filed. It was the opposite of brutality, it was order. Hospitals equipped with X-rays, antibiotics, and surgical tables treated the wounded with methodical care. German doctors among the prisoners recognized the tools and the technique. They're 20 years ahead, one whispered. When a wound healed faster than it ever had back home, that wasn't kindness, it was proof. Science had replaced ideology. Food followed the same logic. 3 meals a day, bread that smelled of yeast instead of sawdust. Eggs, milk, fruit. Some refused at first, afraid it was manipulation. But hunger gives way to reason. Within days they ate in silence, and something shifted. You cannot demonize a country that feeds you better than your own did. A full stomach allows thought. Starvation allows only obedience. For the first time, these men had time to think. They began counting things. Counting was safe. It didn't betray anyone. They counted trucks, locomotives, lights in the distance, slices of bread per man. Numbers told a story no speech could. The United States was not a land of chaos. It was a machine with a human face. Even the guards followed routines, their tempers measured, their orders recorded. Discipline without terror. That concept alone unsettled them more than any interrogation could. When labor assignments came, disbelief turned into study. On the farms of Iowa and Kansas, they saw harvesters move across fields like mechanical armies. One machine did the work of 100 men. Grain elevators swallowed crops by the ton. Farmers spoke casually about yields that sounded impossible. Some prisoners scribbled notes, calculating hectares per hour, gallons of fuel per day. They realized they were witnessing something Germany never achieved: industrial agriculture feeding an industrial war. In the canning plants, the rhythm continued. Women, teenagers, and old men worked side by side on conveyor belts. No overseer shouted, no threats. Yet the work was faster than anything they'd seen under military discipline. Cooperation had replaced coercion. The sight gnawed at them. Democracy didn't mean chaos. It meant efficiency built on trust. At night, the sound of the American system never stopped. Trains whistled in the distance, factories hummed, towns glowed. In Germany, blackout meant survival. In America, light itself was defiance. Through barbed wire, they watched electricity carve lines into the dark. One prisoner murmured, "This country never sleeps." He meant it as awe, not envy. The Liberty shipyards were living equations. Men counted hulls sliding into water every few days. They watched ships assembled like furniture, piece by piece, with welding torches flashing like lightning. The scale was incomprehensible. To men raised on scarcity, abundance looked supernatural. But there was nothing mystical about it, only organization. Logistics had become the new theology. Civic life struck them hardest. Churches sent Christmas parcels. School children wrote letters to a German soldier far from home. The parcels arrived by the thousands: soap, socks, chocolate, even small hand-stitched flags. It wasn't sentimentality. It was systematized compassion. When kindness repeats predictably, it becomes infrastructure. Patterns prove sincerity. They began to ask themselves, how can a nation so organized in mercy lose to any ideology built on fear? Education programs transformed the camps into accidental universities. English classes, vocational training, even correspondence courses from American colleges. In some barracks, men debated democracy and economics over ration coffee. The camp newspapers changed too, from nationalist poems to essays about Reconstruction. Minds once trained for obedience discovered the utility of argument. Freedom began as a technical exercise, learning how to disagree. The German doctors and engineers inside the camps were the first to abandon the old pride. They saw laboratories stocked with equipment they'd only read about. Penicillin vials, sterilized tools, accurate instruments. When an American medic saved a man from amputation, the fact couldn't be explained away. Superior results are ideology's natural predator. Every recovery was a confession written in flesh. And then there was diversity, the contradiction of all contradictions. Women driving trucks, black men operating cranes, teenagers welding fuselages. A society that Germany called degenerate was functioning with precision under the hands of people it would have enslaved or killed. The myth of racial hierarchy collapsed not through lectures, but through competence. The realization was unbearable and liberating at once. Efficiency didn't require purity. It required inclusion. Not every guard was gentle. There were insults, occasional cruelty, a few shootings. Yet even punishment followed procedure. Reports were filed, inquiries held. Red Cross inspectors arrived on schedule. Predictability itself became disorienting. In a totalitarian world, arbitrariness was normal. Here, rules applied even to the powerful. For men taught that authority meant fear, consistency felt revolutionary. Letters home captured the dissonance. They waste nothing, one wrote. Even the food scraps feed livestock. Another, their factories run at night as if it were day. The censors read every line, but they could not censor tone. Admiration leaked between sentences. Some prisoners began feeling shame, not for losing, but for believing the lie. When D-Day came, everything aligned. The scale of the invasion, ships, planes, tanks, suddenly made sense. They had seen the components, the steel mills, the factories, the trucks. Now they saw what those numbers built. Arithmetic became strategy. The equation was complete. Production equals victory. By late 1944, conversion was measurable. Escape attempts dwindled. Violence nearly vanished. Men volunteered for work, for classes, for anything that broke monotony. They weren't re-educated by force. They were recalibrated by observation. Ideology cannot survive contact with a functioning system. Some of them began planning the future. Engineers drafted outlines for post-war reconstruction. Farmers studied American crop rotation and irrigation. Teachers translated English textbooks into German. The camps became workshops for a different Germany, one not yet born, but already envisioned in pencil sketches and notebooks. The transformation frightened a few guards more than it comforted them. "They're learning too much," one officer said. He was right. Knowledge spreads faster than fear once it finds proof. By the winter of 1945, the camps buzzed with quiet purpose. Inside barbed wire, the war had ended months early. The spring of 1945 brought an odd calm. The war outside was ending, but inside the camps a quieter revolution was finishing its work. By then the prisoners no longer flinched at sirens or barked orders. They had adopted the tempo of the country that held them. Measured, practical, efficient. Even their handwriting changed. Rounder, cleaner, more like the notes of the clerks they watched every day. They still wore uniforms marked PW. But something fundamental had inverted. They were now students of the system they had come to destroy. Every week, freight trains arrived at nearby depots loaded with grain, rubber, coal, and ammunition. The precision of it fascinated them. How could one nation supply every front and still feed its own population in comfort? A mechanic from Bremen spent hours timing the intervals between departing locomotives. "Every 11 minutes," he whispered. You could set your watch by them. In Germany, 11 minutes was enough for an air raid to erase a factory. Here it was the heartbeat of productivity. The guards sometimes joked that the prisoners were better accountants than spies. In a sense they were. They calculated everything: rations per head, machine output, distance between plants. When numbers begin to tell a different story than ideology, arithmetic becomes rebellion. The American towns nearby reinforced that rebellion. On Sundays, prisoners working in fields heard church bells and music from public parks. People laughed, bought ice cream, read newspapers debating the war. The sound of leisure confused them more than any lecture could. A society at war that still had time for joy. That was power of another kind. In some camps, theater groups formed. The first plays were patriotic German pieces, but soon prisoners wrote their own dramas about freedom, doubt, and identity. They built stages from scrap wood and painted backdrops using leftover rations tins as pigment trays. One performance featured a scene in which a soldier wakes from propaganda like from a dream. The guards applauded without irony. No censor intervened. The message was clear. Ideas were free here, even for enemies. Libraries expanded. The army supplied thousands of donated books, technical manuals, novels, encyclopedias. Reading became a form of escape more profound than digging a tunnel. Dostoevsky beside Steinbeck, Nietzsche beside Lincoln's speeches. The contrast between the two worlds, authoritarian discipline versus intellectual abundance, burned away certainty like acid on steel. Medical staff continued to record outcomes. Infection rates dropped. Recovery times shortened. For German doctors, these statistics were irrefutable. They sent reports to headquarters noting superior sanitary infrastructure and systemic competence. Those words, cold, bureaucratic, hit a quiet awe. Science had chosen a side, and it wasn't theirs. Occasionally, prisoners were allowed to visit nearby farms unguarded. Some were trusted to drive tractors or deliver produce. None fled. Where would they run? The landscape itself felt freer than their own country ever had. One man wrote later, "I did not escape because I was already outside the prison." He meant the mental one. By summer, they had begun to mirror their captors in discipline. Barracks cleaned on schedule, self-organized work crews, elected spokesmen. The American command noticed and encouraged it. Responsibility was addictive. Order without fear was a revelation. News from Europe arrived slowly. Hitler dead, Berlin fallen, Germany surrendered. There was no cheering in the camps, only silence. The ideology that had defined their lives vanished overnight. In its place was the hum of American machinery still running. That contrast was unbearable. Some wept quietly. Others stared at the horizon as if trying to see home through the wires. Repatriation began months later. Before boarding ships, the men underwent final medical checks and debriefings. American officers asked what they had learned. Answers varied but shared a theme. You do not need to shout to be strong. Your machines never sleep. You fight with systems, not slogans. They left behind their barracks libraries, their improvised theaters, their notebooks full of calculations. The guards kept them, unsure what else to do with this evidence of transformation. Back in Germany, the shock reversed direction. The returning prisoners spoke of America like witnesses of another civilization. Their stories sounded like fiction. Food without rationing, electricity that never failed, women driving trucks, a government that trusted its citizens. Neighbors listened in disbelief. Some accused them of lying, others called them traitors. But curiosity spread faster than shame. Within a year, these men began applying what they had seen. In rural towns, they reorganized cooperatives, introduced crop rotation, and demanded machinery instead of slogans. In factories, they pushed for safety codes, standardization, efficiency metrics. In politics, they joined or founded democratic parties, arguing that debate was not weakness but maintenance, the same way a factory must oil its gears to avoid collapse. Historians later traced how these American prisoners became small catalysts of modernization across post-war Germany. The data were subtle but visible. Higher productivity in regions with many returnees, faster adoption of American management methods, more tolerance for civic pluralism. Ideological defeat had turned into intellectual inheritance. For the United States, the effect was quieter but profound. The nation discovered that its most persuasive weapon wasn't the bomb, the tank, or the plane. It was consistency. Bureaucracy itself had become moral argument. Feeding the enemy on time, providing medical care, delivering mail. These acts, repeated thousands of times, formed a sermon of reliability. America had exported faith in systems. Yet it was not perfection that persuaded. The prisoners saw flaws, racial segregation, poverty, corruption, but they also saw a society willing to confront them publicly. Self-criticism was printed in newspapers, argued in cafes, broadcast on radio. In Germany, such debate had been treason. In America, it was routine maintenance of democracy. The lesson was unsettling and magnetic. Freedom worked because it repaired itself in daylight. Many former prisoners returned later as immigrants. They worked in factories in Detroit, studied engineering in Chicago, or farmed in the Midwest. Some married American women and raised bilingual children. Others stayed in Germany but wrote articles advocating reconciliation. They were living evidence that humane treatment could rewrite allegiance more effectively than any propaganda office. Psychologists who studied them found a pattern. The conversion process followed predictable stages: disbelief, observation, comparison, doubt, and acceptance. It mirrored scientific reasoning itself. When evidence accumulates faster than excuses, belief adjusts. The camps had functioned unintentionally as laboratories of reason. The long-term results extended into the next generation. Sons of former prisoners became engineers, architects, teachers. They inherited not ideology, but methodology: measure, verify, improve. The industrial habits they learned through fences now shaped a reconstructed continent. If you read their memoirs today, a single phrase repeats: they didn't try to convince us, they showed us. That sentence is the thesis of the entire war in miniature. Dictatorships shout, democracies demonstrate. The noise fades, the evidence remains. The post-war years proved the point even further. As Germany rebuilt, many of the machines ordered under the Marshall Plan were American models familiar to returning POWs. They operated them instinctively. Assembly lines, crop sprayers, combines, the same shapes they had once seen under guard. Their hands remembered what their minds had learned. Reconstruction was not just financial aid. It was the continuation of an education begun in captivity. American officers who oversaw the camps wrote their own reports afterward. Most assumed the program was merely humanitarian. Few realized they had conducted the most effective psychological campaign of the century. No re-education manuals, no propaganda films could match the power of running water, full electricity, and 3 meals served on time. Civilization itself had been the message. By the early 1950s, a generation of Germans who had never been to America were quoting its constitution, emulating its business models, sending their children to English classes. They called it modernization. In truth, it was memory, inherited from men who had once worn enemy uniforms. When historians later asked those men what had convinced them, their answers were almost mundane. The order, the food, the hospitals, the lights that stayed on. It was never ideology that collapsed Nazism within them. It was competence. Evil had promised greatness and delivered rubble. Democracy promised procedure and delivered results. The paradox still astonishes scholars. America won part of the moral war not by preaching freedom, but by embodying function. Its factories were sermons, its schedules scripture. The efficiency of kindness, the predictability of justice, the repetition of fairness. These were the quiet forces that outproduced and outlasted tyranny. There is an image that survives from a camp in Texas. A German engineer, near the end of the war, standing by a fence at dusk. Beyond it, a field of lights, floodlamps from a factory that would soon switch to peacetime production. He said to another prisoner, "If they can make light out of war, they can make peace out of anything." That sentence became his private translation of surrender. When he returned home, he refused to join any extremist group. He helped design irrigation systems, joined a city council, and named his son Franklin. His story wasn't unique. Thousands like him carried fragments of that revelation: strength without cruelty, abundance without arrogance, freedom with discipline. And so the legacy endured. American industry did not only win a war, it demonstrated a principle. That truth is self-evident when it functions at scale. A working system is the loudest argument in the world. What began with disbelief ended with conviction. The prisoners arrived as instruments of an empire that believed order required fear. They left believing that true order requires trust. Factories, farms, and hospitals became the classrooms of that conversion. Electricity replaced rhetoric. Repetition replaced indoctrination. And through that relentless rhythm, measured, mechanical, humane, the Nazi mindset cracked, flaked, and finally dissolved. By the time the last transport ships crossed the Atlantic, the process was complete. The war of machines had produced a war of ideas, and the machines had won both.